welcome to another Saturday night Facebook Live in MaryAnn's Whimsical Art World.
Yes,
I am MaryAnn. I am a visual artist and an illustrator. And for those of you who are meeting me for the very first time, this is my workspace in Singapore. I make whimsical art with my original characters, and I share stories about, I guess, finding our place in this world, trying to get connected to who we really are, discovering who we really are. I think for as long as I can remember, ever since I was like a child, I've always, looked outside the window at the moon. I love looking at the moon when I was a kid. That's why the moon appears a lot in my works, FYI. But yes, I like looking at the moon, and I like pondering, is there something bigger out there? Like, is there a bigger world out there? Does magic exist? Are fairies real? I mean, I grew up on Enid Blyton books, so all these like fairies and elves and fantastical magical beings, like I always wondered, where they were out there in the world, and where would I be able to find them one day. Like that, I'm always curious about, like, is there more to life than what we can see? And eventually, as I got older in my teenage years, I also started wondering, like, who am I? Like, who are we, and why are we here? It's like, is there a purpose for us being here? Is there something we're meant to fulfill? Do we have like a set destiny, or is it up to us to create something? And I mean, over the years also, I have like done some exploration. Art is my way of expressing these things that I ask myself. And because, they are very serious topics in a way, and I don't necessarily want to be such a serious person, even though there are times that I think that I should be more serious. At this stage in my life, I'm just like, whatever. I'm just gonna try and be authentic. Like, I just care about being authentic, okay? Whether I'm funny or not is besides the point. Whether I'm serious or not is besides the point. I will be serious sometimes, I will be funny sometimes I would ramble like I am now, because I don't really know what I'm saying sometimes. But that's just how it is. That's just who I am, and this is how I express myself. At the moment, I'm learning how to just continue drawing what I like and expressing things in the way that feels right to me, instead of trying to like put my art and put myself into a box and define what is it and what it's supposed to be. So yeah, cute, whimsical, I would say those are the adjectives to describe my work. But underneath all that, I think, there's all these questions, like, what are we doing here? Who am I? And I'm trying to explore that and express that in my work, and express my journey of going through that in my work. So what I'm going to share today is what has been going on in my whimsical art world this past week, and what I am learning from all of this as well, which I think would be valuable to us as we live our lives, whether you're an artist and creative or not. I mean, we're all artists and creatives in our own way anyway. But I mean, like, the regular term artist and creative. Like, even if you're not that, okay, everything that I'm sharing, I think, is really applicable to all of us in this journey called life. When I first started this group, I thought that I would be putting a lot of like more fine art type of, like these kinds of illustration. And I did not expect the comics thing to appear. It's just that along the way, as I was, producing more of the fine art pieces, I started to question, like, am I really doing this because I want to make fine art pieces? And because I think I should, or because I think that's what people would respond better with? Like, what am I really doing it for? And so I struggle a lot with expressing myself authentically, because, my whole life I've always kind of felt a bit weird, felt a bit like the odd one out, like, like all these questions that I shared with you earlier, right? Like, who are we? What are we doing here? And all that. Sometimes when I try to talk to my friends about that, they kind of give me strange looks and be like, why do you think so much? I get asked that a lot. Why do you think too much? You think too much. Stop thinking so much, like, you'll be happier. But for the longest time, being around people who are more like so-called mainstream, and maybe that they are not really mainstream, but that they think that they're supposed to follow the mainstream, and therefore they are. Because I believe ultimately every single one of us has our own weirdness and our own strangeness, and I think to some extent we all feel like we don't really belong anywhere. to some extent we would feel like misunderstood and that people don't really get us. Whether we realize it or not, to some extent we kind of adapt ourselves too much to our environment and too much to our friends and too much to the people around us, that we might start to lose the authentic parts of ourselves. I've been coming back to that a lot lately and trying to get more connected with who I really am and my strangeness and my weirdness, instead of the front that I think that I'm supposed to present it to the world. And of course I still have to adapt myself in presenting myself to the world, but I want to find like a middle ground somewhere where I can do both, where I can just be myself and yet not be like not totally freak everyone out because they don't understand what's going on. So I have decided that I'm not gonna limit myself to just trying to make what I think is like fine art works or like fine art illustration, all these labels. I have been listening more to my intuition and to my gut, and trying to figure out what attracts me and what is it that I'm drawn to. And so in the process of like allowing myself to be more open to the world, I saw an ad for Domestika, and if you don't know, Domestika is like a website where artists and illustrators teach like their art or teach like ways to build an art career and stuff like that, basically mostly from their own experiences and their own specialties. So I decided that, I'm going to take an approach of like, instead of choosing what I think I should, I'm going to choose what I feel is like calling to me. And so I would watch like the short introduction video for each class to see whether, to get a feel of the instructor, to see whether I like vibe with them. So I signed up for 7 classes in that like couple of hours that I was on that website. This is something totally out of the norm for me, because for the longest time I actually haven't taken any art classes. Even though I've been artist for 10 years, I learn a lot of things kind of randomly along the way. I mean, I pick up things here and there from different artists that I see, that I meet, that we, discuss techniques and stuff like that. But I've never actually joined a class. So this is something that was totally new for me. And I realized also that it's about time that I also invested in my own creativity. So number one thing about, being more creative is that we got to try things outside of what is normal for us, what is outside our comfort zone. And it's not so much like, sometimes it's good to like, force yourself to do things that you don't necessarily really want to do and you're not comfortable with. But I would go the route more of like, what is it that you have always wanted to try, but for some reason you stop yourself? Or, something that you have always thought like, one day I'm gonna do that. One day when I have more time, more money, more whatever, I'm gonna do that. And then, but you never get to it. And so that is the thing. That is the thing that, all the more those are the things that you want to prioritize and, figure out how you can make some time for it. Because taking that step outside of what is usual and normal for you, that is one way to expand your horizon, and that allows us to become more creative as a result. And then so when I have these 7 classes, right? And then I was like, deciding, okay, which one shall I start with first? And automatically my brain is like, let's do this one. I think it's how to create a picture book one, because it's like, it makes the most economical sense, like, as a freelance illustrator. And then I was like, no. Like, backtrack. Let's come back to what is it I really want at this point in time. What is it that really most attracts me? And basically there were 2 classes about comics or comic kind of art, basically. One is like a comic strip artist. The other artist is more like, I would say, illustration with text. And so I watched these 2 classes first, and that resulted in the inspiration for me to draw this comic, which I posted on my social media and in this group last Sunday. And it was a lot of experimentation as well, because I wasn't sure whether I wanted to color it or not. And then at one point I was also like trying to do it digitally. And then I realized in the process of all this, and as I was watching the classes as well, and one of the things that both these artists, one of the things that both of them said is that all that matters is that you enjoy it, and that in the process of making it the best that it can be, you are enjoying that process. and you want to make it the best that it can be only because you love it. And so I was like, okay, fine, if that's the case, then traditional media is like the way to go for me. And so that's how this comic came about. And I decided to put the iPad aside, at least for this, not for other things, and put the iPad aside and just go for it with watercolor. And it took me a few days to decide whether to make the first stroke, because I was so afraid that I would destroy it and it would be ruined. And so a new door kind of opened. And the funny thing also is that as I was looking at these classes as well, one of the things that I noticed that these artists do is that they keep sketchbooks and notebooks. I really don't like keeping a sketchbook, because to me it's I feel like it's a waste of time to draw in a sketchbook. And but because I saw their videos and their how they use the sketchbook in their practice, and a lot of times their sketchbook is where they test out ideas, where they work on drafts first before they actually do the final piece. The reason why they keep a sketchbook and they repeatedly draw these things is so that when you draw it the first time, it's an initial idea, and then when you try to redraw it again, it actually gets better. And when you redraw it again, it gets even better, and you redraw it again, it gets even better. And I did not understand that until I started doing it myself, because this final version of the comic, I think I drew 3 drafts before I came to this one. And even the text also changed each time I redrew it. And even as I drew this on the paper in pencil, things changed as well. And even before I inked it, things changed as well. So I started to understand, oh, okay, sketchbook is actually really important. And so I started to do this thing where when I start getting into my head and thinking that, I need to make this thing look perfect, I go straight away to the sketchbook. Because what I do in the sketchbook is basically stuff like this. If you can see, I just randomly scribble things in there. I randomly draw my characters, and sometimes they're random things that pop to my mind, and I would just write them down. And this is a way to just get all the noise out of my head. I learned along the way that part of us becoming more in tune with ourselves is and becoming more creative also is to allow ourselves to express what is there. And even if you are not an artist or creative in the conventional sense of the word, I recommend keeping a sketchbook, a journal, a notebook, just some place for you to dump whatever nonsense is in your head, and nobody ever needs to see it. It's really just a place for you to express out what is there. And I've noticed that ever since I started doing this, I actually became less caught up in my head of how the art is supposed to look like. And before I start working on anything, I basically come to this first, and I just, again, scribble random things, draw my characters, or sometimes I have an idea for another comic, another artwork. I quickly put it down in here first. And it doesn't necessarily need to lead to anything. Because in the past, I always had this thinking of when artists draw in the sketchbook, it becomes this final product pretty quickly. And now I realize that it's a process. It's the whole process that takes time, and there's little bits here and there, and things would just emerge at the right time. And then the interesting thing then is I start asking myself, where is all this leading to, right? Because automatically, a door opens, and then my brain once again starts, imagining all the possible outcomes that could come from this. It does that every single time. And then I get fixated on that. And so I have to slow myself down and be hang on, just because I start drawing comics doesn't mean I become a comics artist straight away. For some reason, my brain goes that way. Just how, I'm doing these kinds of illustrations means I can only do them. So I decided I'm not gonna think too much of where this is leading, okay, but I'm just gonna go with what comes. I think at this point, I'm exploring the combination of illustration and text. So it could be comics, it could just be pictures with words, it could be pictures with the words in them, or pictures with the speech bubbles. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to define exactly what it is. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that, a lot of times we automatically put ourselves into boxes, and we start thinking that, because I am whatever your profession is, right? I mean, just because that is your day job doesn't mean it's really your dream career or your so-called the profession that you really associate yourself with. And sometimes when we have been working in the same type of like industry, or for me the same kind of artwork for so long, it's very easy to get stuck there into thinking that that is the kind of artist I am, or that is the kind of profession that I'm in. But actually we are so much more than that. And yes, in the world we live in, it is very easy to in some sense, we kind of have to define ourselves so that people understand who we are to some extent and what we do. But when you're on your own and when you're by yourself, then we have to learn to make time to not get so attached to those labels that we put on ourselves, and explore different aspects of ourselves, explore more things about who we are, and and not get stuck and not get fixated in that. As one thing I'm learning, first of all, is that we are actually really free to be whoever we want to be. And to a certain extent, yes, we have to adapt ourselves to our environment, but at the end of the day, we are the ones who put the limitations on ourselves, because we can choose whether we want to hold on to those labels or we want to evolve and try something different. Being more creative is also about allowing ourselves to explore the things that we've always wanted to, and expand our horizons and see something different, something new we haven't seen before. And then the second thing I want to talk about is the importance of keeping a sketchbook, journal, or notebook, even if you're not an artist, because that is a place for you to be yourself, basically. A place for you to express yourself and be yourself, and nobody ever has to see it, okay? You want to write, you write. You want to draw, you want to make random scribbles in there, you're free to do that too. It's like a space that you can call your own, that's a physical, extension of you. Number 3 is do whatever makes you happy, excited, whatever makes you feel good. Because I think all the great stuff that has been created in this world over the course of history, a lot of it is because the people who created them or discovered them, or they did it out of their love for that subject, the love for the work that they were into. And even though they, it could be torturous at times, even though, off the top of my head example, like Thomas Edison, discovering the right material for the light bulb thing. I know there's a lot of disputes about how he wasn't the one who did all that work, okay, but let's put that aside for the time being. It could be frustrating to keep trying and not getting the result that you want. But ultimately, what's more important is that, are you enjoying the process of getting there? Are you enjoying the process of making the art that you are making, whether you're an artist or a different kind of artist, a non-artist artist, all these labels. At the end of the day, it's like we want to do what makes us feel happy, what makes us feel excited, what makes us feel good, and that we enjoy. Because when we really look at it, we're all heading in one direction, which is, eventually we're going to leave this place. And if that time is going to come anyway, you might as well spend whatever time you have now doing the things that bring you joy and doing the things that you love. Even if it's not to create something, amazing in the world, even if it's just for yourself. I think that's really one of the most important things. And that's something that I'm learning now to practice. Okay, after 10 years of being an artist, I am actually finally learning how to practice just doing what I enjoy and stop trying to fit into what I think the world wants me to be. I know it sounds so ridiculous, but it's just something that I deal with. And I guess that's part of my process in figuring out who I am and what is it that I really want to create in this world.